Morning people. So Kemi Badenoch, the Trade and Business Secretary, she's flying to India today in the hopes of hashing out a new post-Brexit trade deal with India. And we need to go through what she and the Express who reported it had to say because it's mostly bullshit and kinda weird. First, the headline. Landmark deal proves Brexit voices of doom are wrong. Yeah, so according to the government's official documents, this new trade deal with India will improve our economy over the next 12 years by between 0.12 and 0.22%. compared to Brexit, which is a loss of 4%. Once again, the maths is not mathing. Kemi Badenoch has hit back at the Brexit bores, the naysayers, the doommongers, insisting global Britain is thriving. We've consistently had the highest inflation in the G7, which means the cost of living has been worse in the UK than in any other similarly advanced economy. And Rishi Sunak himself has admitted that Brexit is the reason that our exports are lagging behind the rest of the G7. So with higher food prices, crippled businesses and a poverty crisis, who exactly is thriving? Kemi Badenoch goes on to say, we have proven time and time again that we can sign high-quality trade deals with major nations. We've already signed several agreements with 73 countries, as well as securing a strong, mutually beneficial deal with the EU. Far from isolating ourselves, a newly independent UK is building an ever-stronger network of allies in every corner of the globe. But almost all the trade deals they've done have been with countries that we already had trade deals with as members of the EU. Not to mention, it was made embarrassingly clear to Liz Truss that the deal she did with Japan isn't as good as the one the EU has with Japan, which we would have been part of.
She's the one who's repeatedly claimed over the last 75 days that this deal that she's negotiated with Japan goes, I quote, above and beyond the EU-Japan deal, goes, I quote, further and faster than the EU-Japan deal. The final assessment produced last month by this department for the long-term impact of the UK-Japan deal and the forecast increase in UK GDP was £1.5 billion. Now, let's compare those figures to her department's assessment for the long-term impact of the EU-Japan deal. And the forecast increase in UK GDP was not £1.5 billion, but £2.6 billion. Now, I don't know about you, Madam Deputy Speaker, but that doesn't sound to me like further and faster or above and beyond or additional or higher to me. It sounds like smaller, slower, lower, lamer.
Plus, some deals like the one the Tories have done with Australia are directly harmful to UK farmers. And yet Kemi says the voices of doom have been proven decisively wrong. I'm sorry, which voices of doom? Boris Johnson?
Vital drugs have not been able to be moved from Great Britain to Northern Ireland, 30 drugs, including cancer drugs. I think about 200 companies have stopped shipping stuff.
Rishi Sunak?
So why have we got the significant reduction in trade intensity that stayed low, whereas others have come back?
Yeah, as I said, without a doubt, we're changing our trading relationship with the EU, and that means a different set of controls and things that people will have to do, and that will obviously have an impact, and that I'm sure is a big part of the reason why this is happening.
Tory Minister George Freeman?
Where the costs are obvious,
So you agree with Chris that it is costing?
I think it's
that we are paying the cost of Brexit in our food bills?
I think it has had some costs.
Nigel Farage?
But what I do think is we haven't actually benefited from Brexit economically. Brexit has failed.
You're right, those leftier Ramoners like Nigel Farage, Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak, they're always talking this country down. They just need to believe in Brexit more. Far from turning their backs on the UK, companies are queuing up to invest here. Yeah, like the 100 or so craft beer companies that have closed down in the last 18 months because they've been crippled by Brexit trade barriers, or the 5-star Michelin restaurant Le Gavroche that says they're closing down as well because of Brexit. And that is just from the last week, because look at this graph from the Office of National Statistics. Right there is the moment that we voted to leave the EU, and you can see how investment in the UK was growing right up until the referendum, and then it flattened, and it still hasn't recovered. The Economics Observatory has even plotted where investment in the UK would be if not for Brexit. What Kemi's referring to are the various businesses from Nissan to Jaguar Land Rover who the Tories have paid hundreds of millions of pounds to as a bribe to get those companies to stay here after those companies explicitly said that expensive Brexit trade barriers would make them move abroad. And even despite those payoffs, Ford, Vauxhall, Land Rover have all warned the government this year that if the Tories don't renegotiate the Brexit deal, those companies will leave the country. And given that Rishi Sunak will soon be meeting the Indian Prime Minister to discuss the trade deal, they then go on to say, it is hoped that Mr. Sunak and his Indian counterpart Narendra Modi will announce one of the biggest trade pacts in the world in what would be a major coup for the UK and heap embarrassment on the EU. That's referring to the fact that the EU stopped negotiations with India in 2013 and relaunched them last year. The implication being that the EU would be humiliated if the UK got a deal with India first. But leaving the EU is costing the UK 4% of our economy. Gaining this trade deal with India would only gain us a potential 0.2% of our economy. Meanwhile, the EU, unlike us, hasn't lost trade with its 30 closest neighbours, and they're going to get a deal with India anyway. And you're celebrating getting that 0.2% boost first? Score! But this has always been the problem. Damaging ourselves is worth it to these people if it can feel like we're somehow getting one over on the Europeans. That's what patriotism means to these people. But here's where it starts to get weird, because the article then goes on to talk about how the fact that Rishi Sunak and his wife both have Indian heritage might help them get a trade deal with India. Experts are hopeful that Mr. Sunak can play on his proud heritage and influence to bolster Anglo-Indian ties and strengthen our standing in the wider region as we continue to strike new and exciting trade deals. Honestly, this reminded me of that bit by Chris Rock.
Women like to get their husbands together that don't even know each other and have like a grown man play date, put you in a room with some other married motherfucker and go, he likes baseball just like you. And you in some room with some fucking stranger going, I like baseball. Yeah, baseball good. Yeah. Honey, who the fuck is this?
Because Rishi Sunak having Indian heritage doesn't change the nature of the negotiations. He still came to power on a policy that only exists because Nigel Farage promised people that they would see fewer brown faces in the UK. And now the main stumbling block of the negotiations is that India is demanding that we open our doors to more Indian immigration. The head of policy at the British Chamber of Commerce says that having much more visa access to the UK will be part of the key things to get a deal over the line. And Rishi Sunak was elected on a manifesto that promised to cut immigration. Rishi Sunak's Indian heritage doesn't change the reality that the UK and Indian government have incompatible objectives. But the Express, unlike several other newspapers, chose not to mention this, instead focusing on their belief that there would be a meeting of the minds because the two prime ministers happen to have the same skin colour. And if you think this is weird, don't worry.
It can get weirder.
It says that this deal will enhance Britain's standing as a virile, ready, willing and able business partner. Sorry, virile? Why you gotta make it weird? It then goes on to boast about the UK joining the CPTPP, saying, membership of this pact in the world's fastest growing economic region is a Brexit bonus that would have been impossible if the UK had remained shackled to the archaic rules and regulations of the protectionist Brussels cabal. Brexit bonus? Can you people do maths? If leaving the EU costs us 4% of our economy, and joining the CPTPP gets us 0.08% of our economy, then even if you throw in the India deal as well, that is still a 3.7% loss. The unbridled confidence among British businesses comes as UK exports to the EU and rest of the world reached record highs of almost £400 billion in 2022. Now, first off, we're experiencing record inflation, so of course the total price of our exports has gone up, just like it has in many other countries. But even Rishi Sunak has admitted that Brexit is the reason that our exports have not kept up with other countries. And as for British confidence in Brexit Britain, the government did a survey of 3,000 companies and published the results last week. And 58% of businesses say they don't expect any significant benefit from any of the post-Brexit trade deals. Meanwhile, the most common reason that they gave for their export numbers suffering was Brexit. But the weirdness continues. The International Monetary Fund forecasts the UK economy will grow by 0.4% this year, an upward revision of 0.7%, and the flaccid Eurozone flirts with recession, which means a shrinking economy. But again, why you gotta make it weird? First, we're virile. Then, the EU's flaccid. This whole article reads like an advert for blue pills. Hey, you having a soft time pleasing your partner? You want to feel like a man again? Try this Brexit. Pump you right up. But secondly, again, maths. They say we're projected to grow by 0.4%, but that's an upwards reassessment by 0.7% above the previous projection. So you're literally saying that our economy was predicted to shrink by 0.3%, and now it's predicted to grow by 0.4%, which means that the EU aren't the only ones flirting with recession. Never mind the fact that the reason why we've had some rapid growth is because we had the worst recession in the G7 in 2020, and therefore our economy was the last one to recover to its pre-pandemic size. I really wish these politicians and journalists understood how nuts it is to boast about the state of the economy when people are experiencing the worst poverty crisis of their entire lives. I'm Femi. Have a great week.